Hello, I'm AJ. Dispatch, released from October 2025, is the most popular choose-your-own-adventure game in recent history, so you're well aware of its setting and significance. My goal with this video is to explain the temporal setting of the content released so far for Dispatch, that being its first 8 episodes and the 6 comics released for it. Along with that, I will also chart out a timeline for the game, which, based on my findings, contradict each other and will therefore be split off into 2 timelines. That basically means that all the evidence put together kind of points in 2 directions, so you'll see both of those outcomes. Yeah. One thing I want to note is that every single clock seen in Dispatch is very consistent. Whenever you look at it, you actually get a really good range about what time it is in the game. That amount of detail makes me very excited to chart out this timeline. Before I actually get started, I think it's important to actually chart out the events of the first 8 episodes in 3 weeks without any temporal setting. That means I'm not going to put them in a year yet, but I am going to sort them based on what time of the week they take place in. This is actually really easy to do because, well, it makes sense based on the dialogue in the episode. Each episode takes place in about 1 to 2 days, no more than that, and there are no large time skips between scenes based on dialogue. All the dialogue locks every scene together into the same day that each episode takes place in. So for the first week, we have episode 1 and 2, Pivot and Onboard, which take place on Thursday and Friday consecutively. We know Onboard takes place on Friday based on a bunch of characters saying that the day today is Friday.
Taking bets on when you'll quit.
Friday?
Today's Friday.
I know.
It's Friday. I'm not gonna ask. You headed out?
Which means that if Pivot takes place yesterday,
Meet me at the SDN offices tomorrow.
or the day before Onboard, that has to make it on Thursday. But you might be asking, oh, what if it dips into midnight because it is nighttime for a lot of the scene? Well, at the end of Pivot, we could see Robert Robertson's phone, and the time says 11:37 p.m. Therefore, it has to take place before midnight and entirely set on Thursday, well, for the main present scene. We know that from the Dispatch phone line, Robert had his meeting before 7 a.m. because Blonde Blazer was there to attend it. And then between 7 and 11:37 p.m., we know that the whole episode takes place, which is less than a day. The time frame for Onboard is between 9 a.m. to 8:07 p.m. or thereabouts. I chose 9 a.m. because it has to be after Waterboy wakes up, which is at 8 a.m. according to his comic, and a little before 9:30 a.m. based on the clock scene in the waiting room. I chose 8:07 p.m. as the end time because we can actually see the sun setting, and the sunset on that day in Torrance, California was 8:07 p.m. Now, since we've already placed Onboard, we could actually place 2 of the comics, that being Splash and Shell Shock. Splash takes place sometime between 8 a.m. and the start of Dispatch Episode 2, Onboard, and Shell Shock takes place directly after the events of Onboard on the same Friday, as we could hear from the voice lines that Phenomenon scheduled the sushi restaurant visit. Cool. Now we move on to the second week, which later on Robert calls his first week, but is actually technically the second regarding the story of the game. Episode 3, Turnover, takes place on the Monday following Onboard. This has to be the Monday following Friday because of the dialogue between Blonde Blazer, Robert, and Chase saying that they have to conduct this meeting on Monday.
Okay, we'll do it your way. Monday, we'll get them in a room and introduce them to their new supervillain leader.
The dialogue in Onboard also establishes that the Z-Team takes weekends off, which is going to be important later when charting the timeline.
I was thinking about it over the weekend.
During Turnover, we actually get a look at Sonar's file, where we see the date February 2023 at the top. This is actually great for placing the comic The Last Bender because it tells us Sonar was indicted to the Z-Team on February 15th, 2023. Therefore meaning that the comic has to take place before that because it is before Sonar and Malevola join the Z-Team. If we assume that February 15th is the day seen at the end of the comic, that means Malevola and Sonar spent Valentine's Day 2023 together, which I not only think is cute but intentional by Ad Hoc. Episode 3, Turnover, takes place entirely on Monday from 8:55 a.m. to 10 p.m., which is about 14 hours. I placed a restructure the day after Turnover simply because it is the first time we see the Z-Team without Coupe or Sonar. Along with the first scene at the beginning where Robert gets pranked, it's likely that this day is Tuesday. It could technically work on Wednesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, but I placed it on Tuesday based on the dialogue with the Z-Team during the dispatch. Along with that, in team building, there's dialogue with Punch Up and Prism, where Prism says that Robert was decided he was not a narc on this Tuesday.
Wait, when did we decide he wasn't the bad guy?
Tuesday.
Alright, then we go to episode 5, Team Building, which is set on Friday and Saturday.
Good week, everybody. See you all on Monday.
We know that the events of Team Building are set on the same week as Turnover and Restructure because the date with Blonde Blazer that Robert has is mentioned as happening recently by Flambe.
Yo, man, word in the hallways is you went on a date. That true?
Anywho, this episode actually spans 18 hours between Friday and Saturday, starting before 9:01 a.m. with Robert at the desk and ending at 3 a.m. with the Z team eating tacos.
Well, what you missed was 3 a.m. tacos leading to 4 a.m. heartburn, followed by 5 a.m. diarrhea. And despite all of that, it was lovely.
Now we're going to move on to the third and final week of Dispatch, where the events of the last 3 episodes take place from Wednesday to Friday. Now, there is an error in the timeline based on if Flambe is still on the Z team at this point, because he will say during the dispatch that eating tacos was last night.
I'm still thinking about that fucking taco place from last night. It was good, huh?
Flambe is still out sick.
Sick of your shit, maybe. But yeah, I haven't heard anything from him since last night.
Not only does this not work with my timeline placing the event on Wednesday, but it doesn't work with the rest of the dialogue given in episode 8 and the earlier episode 2. I know that the Z team takes weekends off, so therefore if Saturday night is the night he was speaking of, then it should be Sunday as the today, but that can't be it because they don't work on weekends. Along with that, we know Robert was in a coma for 14 to 15 hours because of the explosion, so we're going to jump a little bit after that. The actual prologue of Moving Parts is on Tuesday night at about 10 or 11 p.m. This is based on Royd saying that the explosion was 14 to 15 hours ago, and the clocks on the bullpen saying that it is now 1 p.m., therefore having the explosion be before that, and therefore on Tuesday night. So just putting everything together, it makes more sense to place this episode on Wednesday instead of Monday. Something I didn't mention about Moving Parts is that there is technically evidence saying that it's a different week from the last 2 episodes, but I'm inclined to believe it's right before based on the dialogue and the reactions from the Z-Teamers regarding Invisigal's suspension. But in Synergy, you do actually get a mission where one of the dispatching segments from Moving Parts is referenced as being the week prior to this dispatch.
It's a full-on gang war happening in the warehouse district. Looks like Red Ring and the Frigos.
Wait, Beefcake? Didn't we fight her last week? She was the one attacking the Frigos base.
And also, you know, the whole last night argument, and maybe even the Sunday school reference.
But I don't know if sending Malevolent to Sunday school was the move.
You know, it's up to you to decide. Episode 7 takes place right after the events of episode 6, because in retrospective, we could see Chase
You've
in a
all
coma.
probably heard some version of what happened. Let's get to it. Main takeaways are that Invisigal has been suspended.
But indicatively, we see Chase get into a coma the night before, and then immediately now, we see Robert still discussing it, and the Z team discussing it as if it just happened, therefore making sense for it to be placed on Thursday. All the dialogue seems to imply that the episode takes place right after Chase is put in a coma, which would therefore be Thursday. Along with that, the ending of the episode takes place sometime after 9 p.m, but leads directly into the events of episode 8, Synergy. In Synergy, we get an immediate shot of the bullpen clocks, and it tells us that it is sometime either after 12 a.m, but before 12:05 a.m. based on Robert's computer clock. This is really exceptional from Ad Hoc because it actually places the entirety of the episode in its own day, with episode 7 being set on the day prior, which is really cool for the timeline placement. Because of that dialogue, this makes me assume that the episode is on Friday, but as we get into it later, there is actually a prop that puts episode 6 on Wednesday, and therefore makes the rest of the placements work out from Wednesday to Friday. Anywho, Synergy takes place from about 12:05 a.m. to sometime after 6 a.m. I say after 6 a.m. because the sunrise on that day was about 5:30 in the morning. Alright, as I mentioned earlier, there are 2 contradicting timelines that I placed the events of the game in. This is because there are 2 sources that have different placements for the events of the game, both of them being in around the mid-2020s. As you might know, there was a promotional phone line for the game that was released in around August of 2025, a little bit before the release of the game. But in November, the phone line was actually shut down, meaning that none of the voice lines can actually be heard. A part of the phone line was a voicemail feature where you could actually log into the character's voicemails and hear dated voicemails. This is what told us that Robert's press conference is before 7 a.m. based on a voicemail Mandy sent to Chase. Anywho, if you give all the voicemails a listen, you'll actually find out that Dispatch is set in July 2023, with episode 1 and 2 being on July 6 and July 7. Now, does this work? I mean, yeah, sure. July 6, 2023 is a Thursday and July 7th is a Friday. So if you want to go ahead with the timeline, you can do that, as it sets the game from July 6th to July 21st, 2023. Now, there are pros and cons to this timeline. It supports Chase's age, it's an official source from Ad Hoc placing the events of the game, and it supports one of Sonar's birthdays, therefore meaning that his two contradictory birthdays are evened out and sorted. Now, the cons, however, is that Flambe's birthday on his flight license does not make any sense, the phone line is dead and there's no actual way to hear these voice lines, and the calendar on Robert's desk and in Waterboy's home is wrong, as July 2023 does not start on a Monday and does not have 31 days. The thing about the July 2023 placement is that I'm pretty sure the calendar was a focus on it, because if you look at July 2024, the calendar starts on a Monday and has 31 days, like Robert's desk calendar. But I'm pretty sure what happened is that during the phone line's production, they realized, oh, the game's not set in 2024, so they kept the July month, moved it back a year, and forgot to change it to what I think would be May, because May would fit best in the timeline, it being in the middle and having the same Monday 31 days. Now, timeline 2. The second timeline sets the game in February 2024. Now, you might be thinking, oh, February 2024 does not start on a Monday and has 28 days. Well, if we actually look at January 2024, that does actually start on Monday and has 31 days. So we could make the assumption that Robert's calendar is just brand new, and that Waterboy or his grandmother just didn't bother going through the next month. Now, what makes me set it on February instead of January? Well, in moving parts, we could actually see the date Wednesday, February 21st, while Robert is in the hospital. This is perfect and actually aligns really well with the February 2024 calendar. Now, one of the benefits of this timeline is that it uses no outside sources, meaning that if you're stuck at the edge of the universe with a copy of Dispatch, you can make your own timeline based on it without any outside sources. I mention this because the phone line is dead. Another pro is that it supports Flambe's birthday on his flight license and both of Sonar's birthdays, meaning that either one can be your choice as to his actual birthday. And finally, the calendar seen on Robert's desk and Waterboy's home works perfectly with this placement as being the month before that, or, you know, thereabouts. One of the cons of this timeline is Chase's age. As we know earlier, Chase is supposed to be 39 years old during the events of Onboard. Well, if Onboard is set in February 2024, that would make Chase in 2003 18 or 19, which contradicts his dialogue in the flashback from Retrospective. I'll get into that later, but another one of the cons is ignorance. Because Ad Hoc already has an official timeline setting the game in July 2023, they will likely not be looking at February 2024 to be their official placement. Therefore, meaning the game is more likely to be set officially in July 2023, but until Season 2 comes out, we really don't know. You might be asking, okay, if we could be judgmental about placing the game in 2023 or 2024, why can't we do 2022 or 2025? Well, I'm not going to do 2022 because it just doesn't make sense. I know there's people saying, oh, if you take Chase's age and add 19 to it, like he says he is, then, 19 years after 2023 is 2022. But if you look at the other character ages and the fact that there's little to no representation for 2022 in the game, it just makes little sense to set Dispatch in 2022. Now sure, Chase's age might lead you to believe, oh yeah, sure, but just looking at the other character ages and the fact that it just doesn't make much sense leads you to believe that that's just not the case. So what about 2025? Well, there are actually 3 pieces of evidence that set the game in 2025. That being a calendar scene in the break room, the 2025 April magazine that Sonar reads, and the 2025-02-11 date seen in Moving Parts. Now sure, if you want to have the game set in 2025, you can. You could have it set after April for Sonar's magazine, and after 11-2, which can be February 11th or November 2nd. and based on Robert's calendar, have it be set in December 2025. But again, I just don't think that's the case based on the character ages and Chase's age. Chase just cannot be 39 in 2025 because of him being 20 in 2003. But if you want to make an argument, you could technically place Dispatch in December 2025 to align with Robert's calendar, but it just doesn't really make sense. It makes more sense to set it in 2023 or 2024. Now that I've listed out all my reasoning, why am I confused about February 2024 and July 2023? Well, it's because either can technically work. If you want to not focus on the phone line, you can make your own timeline and have it set in February 2024, and that'll, technically work. But if you want to remain consistent with Chase's age and also consistent with Ad Hoc's official messaging, then sure, July 2023 can work, you just can never find out that it's July. Well, I mean technically or officially. I made up some mock-up timelines for either setting. At the top is the yellow timeline, which come from sources that say the actual date and don't say that a certain time period was this long ago. Alright, now let's get on to Chase's age. Chase, in the present day events, is 39 years old.
Then how old are you really?
I turned 39 a few months ago, but when the Dave and Buster's shit was lit.
But in 2003, he is 20.
I'm 20.
We have to go over 19 years in order for Chase to be as old as he is, but evidently he has to turn 39 in 2022 for his age to make sense in the present. 2024 just cannot work as he is born way too late, but technically speaking, if you want to make July 2023 work, it can. We know for a fact that Chase has to be born in either 1982 or 1983 to be 20 years old in 2003. Chase being born in 1983 actually works really well if we assume Dispatch is set in July of 2023. As we know, Chase says in onboard that he is actually 39 and a few months old. Well, a few months can be anything, as long as it's after July 2022. Based on Chase being 39 years old in July 2023, if we go back 12 months to July 2022, Chase would be 38, just not consecutively, and it would make sense for him to be 38 12 months ago. Now, in the 12 months between July 2022 and July 2023, Chase turned 39. Along with that, if we take the evidence of Chase being 20 years old in 2003, that makes his birthday 1982 or 1983, meaning that he can't be born in 1984. This means that Chase could not have celebrated his 39th birthday between January and July of 2023, meaning that he was born between July 7th, 2022 and December 31st, 2022. So in the range of those 4 to 6 months, Chase turned 39 and can be 20 years old in 2003. But we could do a little better because Chase says that he's only a few months older than 39 years old. So it's a lot more likely that Chase was born in late 1983 than in between those 6 months. This also moves the retrospective flashback in late 2003 because it would have to be after Chase turned 20 years old because he would spend the majority of 2003 as a 19-year-old. Now, another fun piece of trivia is that now that we have a birth date for Chase, we can actually have a birth date for Robert Robertson. If Chase was born in late 1983, then by June 1995, Chase would be 11 and a half years old, or thereabouts. I say June 1995 because that's when the Raiders left Los Angeles.
When?
When I was your age, I cried for weeks when the Raiders left LA.
Yeah, that's totally the fucking...
And now that we've set the flashback in late 2003, if we go back 11 and a half years from late 2003, that places Robert Robertson's birthday in mid-1992, meaning that in July 2023, Robert is actually 31 years old. Now, this only works with the July 2023 placement, which, if you look at Robert's current age based on his birthday of 1992, he would either be 30 or 31 years old in the present day. Now, you could technically make it work with February 2024, where Robert would technically be 32 years old during that time period, but I mean, it just doesn't work if Chase is not born in late 1983, so therefore he just wouldn't have a correct age. Again, that is some really cool world building from Ad Hoc Studios to hide a character's age and birthday based on references and time spans, and actually having you use math to find out Robert's age. But yeah, Robert is 11 and a half in 2003, making him 30 or 31 years old in July 2023, and him being born in mid-1992. Now over here is a large timeline I have set up. Now you actually see 3 timelines, which is confusing because I only mentioned 2 of them. Well, up above are hard dates based on evidence that come from actual dates being shown on screen and not ranges of time being in the past. Above, you can see Flambe's birthday of August 20th, 1987. I put the birthday up there because that is an actual hard date given to us instead of just him being born 36 years ago. Now below that, we see two other timelines, but these are based on the character birthdays and whether or not you set dispatch in July 2023 or February 2024. I have this little icon for a phenomenon that says post 1972. I have it there because in team building, Phenomenon says,
"When I first arrived on Earth, the ladies at the Nordstrom rack I worked at called me Dumpy due to my large posterior."
The first Nordstrom rack is not established until November 1972 based on this document, thereby meaning that if the first thing Phenomenon did when he got to Earth was work for Nordstrom rack, it would have to be sometime after November 1972. Below that, I have a bunch of the character ages and birthdays, which you can skim through. But what's more important is the day that Mecha Man died. We know that Mecha Man Astro died
15 years. 15 years.
The last 15 years,
15 years before the present day events of Dispatch, meaning that his actual death date is either in 2008 if the game is set in July 2023, or 2009 if the game is set in 2024. Then in the late 2010s, a few years before the events of Onboard, Mecha Man has his fight with Flambe, where Flambe loses 3 of his fingers. Then 4 months before the events of Dispatch, Robert has his fight with Shroud and is then launched into a 4-month coma, apparently. If Robert spent the few weeks after the blast recovering his suit pieces, then that would mean he would not actually be in a coma, meaning that the media assumed he was in a coma and he was just actually hiding out for those 4 months. Now what's cool about this is that the reporter says
it was just over 4 months ago that,
meaning that in order to be over 4 months ago, it cannot be after mid-March because that would be under 4 months. You might be thinking, what about late February? Well, I don't think late February works because the reporter was specific in saying over 4 months ago. Alright, now if I'm focusing on Dispatch being set in July 2023, then the battle with Shroud actually has to be in the first 5 days of March 2023 and not in late February or late March. The reason I'm specifying it was in the first 5 days of March 2023 is because the reporter on July 6, 2023 said the battle was over 4 months ago, meaning that before March 6, in those 5 days, or over 4 months before July 6, Robert had his fight with Shroud. Now you might be thinking, what about late February 2023? Well, I don't think that's the case because if the reporter wanted to say, oh, it was under 5 months ago, he could have said that, but he specified over 4 months ago. Therefore meaning that it's probably in the first 5 days of March 2023. Now, if you want to do the same math with February 2024, that would place the fight with Shroud between October 1st and October 7th of 2023. Alright, now it's time for the comics. I've already placed Splash and Shell Shocked on the same day as Onboard, which, you know, they take place right before and after the events of that episode. Get Up is self-explanatory. It's set in 1999, so, you know, that's pretty easy to place. The Death of Mecha Man is set 18 years before the present-day events of the game, which can either be 2008 if the game is set July 2023, or 2009 if it's set February 2024. The only comic I can't really place is Past the Dukes, or however you pronounce it, because there's no real, like, confirmation of when it's set. All we know is that it's between 2023 and the day Punch Up was born. If you're just here for a quick overview of the timeline, then here are your graphics explaining that. But for the majority, Dispatch is set in the 2020s, either in July 2023 or February 2024, over a span of 15 days. But anyways, yeah, this is my first kind of video like this. Sorry if I'm talking too fast or if there's any errors in the timeline placements. Feel free to comment your own ideas for it, but yeah, thanks for watching. Goodbye.